Greetings. Today I'm going to talk more about arguments. I'd said earlier that philosophy is mainly about arguments, making arguments, reading arguments, understanding arguments. The world is flooded with opinions, but opinions don't usually matter very much if they're not supported by evidence and reasons. In other words, unless they're backed up by an argument. Today I'll talk about the points of a well-made argument, drawing on the work of Stephen Talman, along with the work of John D. Ramage and John C. Bean, teachers of rhetoric. The assignments in this class are going to be 3 brief position papers using the CDW model. And then your final will be a more substantial, a longer position paper, also using the CD model. So what is the CD model? Here's a picture of it, just a graphic overview of it. It consists of 3 parts. These are the parts of an argument: claim, data or evidence, and the warrant. The claim is the same as the thesis statement. It's the point that you are making. The data is your evidence. If you are discussing a text such as the apology, which I'm going to ask you to do, it might be a direct quote from the text, but it might also be a summary or a paraphrase of something that Socrates said or the events that happened in the text. Sometimes it's simple facts unrelated to your claim or an event that happened. It's whatever counts as evidence to support your claim. And then the warrant is where the real work of making your argument usually takes place. It's your opinion or your insight or your analysis, your interpretation. This is where you sell your idea and try to persuade your audience that you're right. So let's dive a little bit deeper into each one of those. A claim states your position on the issue you have chosen to write about. And there are some criteria. Some claims are better than others as far as supporting a good piece of writing. A good claim is not obvious. Why bother proving a point that nobody could disagree with? The oxygen is important to human life. Okay, you could probably prove that's true, but why bother? Nobody is arguing with you. Nobody's on the other side. A good claim is engaging. Consider your audience's attention span and make interesting claims which point out new ideas. Teach the reader something new. Sometimes I say that the #1 rule of good writing is be interesting, and that's just as important in writing philosophy as it is in writing anything else. Other times when I'm in a different mood, I say the first rule of writing is be honest. I think both are critically important. A good claim is not too vague. Attacking enormous issues with broad generalizations, it's just not persuasive. It's not even interesting. If you have 4 pages to do a paper, don't make a book-sized claim. A good claim is logical. It emerges from reasonable consideration of evidence. This doesn't mean that any particular bit of evidence only has one logical interpretation. Reasonable people often do disagree, but you still need to be reasonable. A good claim is debatable. In other words, there are more than one side to the issue. Claims that simply state facts or claims that are only opinion fail as arguments. They don't make good arguments. So which of the following sentences makes a good claim? A, teachers are posed with many problems today. B, though they seem to be mere entertainment, Hollywood movies are actually responsible for reinforcing cultural stereotypes. Or C, Ophelia is my favorite character in Hamlet because she is the most interesting. Well, claim one, it's just too big and vague. Focus in on one or two problems. Teachers are assigned too many students, or teachers lack budget resources to create compelling presentations. Claim two is pretty good. What evidence could you provide to support this claim? What warrants could you write? In the past, Hollywood often stereotyped natives as ferocious savages. For a long time, natives were represented as more wise and connected to nature than other people were. Are there stereotypes in the presentation of natives in the TV series Yellowstone that's appearing on cable today? Obviously, I think this thesis, this claim would give you lots of directions to move, and you could say lots of things that were interesting and controversial. So there would be something to argue about. Claim three, weak. Most interesting says nothing, really. When we don't want to commit ourselves to an opinion about something, we often say, well, that's interesting. So data. Claims, data, warrant, data. Data is evidence. If you're doing something like I'm asking you to do, which is to write a position paper on something that happens or takes place in Socrates, the Apology, then a direct quote from that text could be evidence. If you say Socrates is worried about X, quote from the text and show us that worry. The definition of the evidence which you cite to support your claim. Like a lawyer presenting evidence to a jury, you have to support your claim with facts, and unsupported assertion has no force. So data can include several things. It can be facts or statistics, that's objectively determined data about your topic. It can include expert opinion. The media and our essays are full of learned opinions, which you should cite frequently, both to support your argument and to disagree with other people's arguments. When you quote authors, properly cite them in your paper. Just get in that habit. If you're collecting evidence from some other source, tell us the source. It's just a part of being honest. It's a part of being a good scholar, being thorough. Personal anecdotes can be used as data. These are probably the hardest kind of data to use very well, because you need to not get so caught up in your feelings about the personal anecdote, the personal story, your personal experience, that you lose sight of how it fits into a persuasive argument. Personal experience can help bring a lot of power to an argument, but you have to make sure that it really is supporting what you're saying it's supporting. And the warrant, this is maybe the hardest one of the three elements to get your mind around, and probably the most important. The warrant interprets the data and shows how it supports your claim. In other words, it explains why the data proves the claim you're making. In trials, lawyers for opposing sides quite often agree on the data, but hotly disagree about the warrants. And a defense attorney's failure to offer strong warrants may result in a warrant for the defendant's arrest. A philosopher would say that the warrant helps to answer the question, what else must be true for this proposition to be true? Think about that. I'll develop that at more length later. But in order for this claim to be true, what else has to be true? A good warrant will be a reasonable interpretation of the facts. A good warrant will be logical without illogical interpretive leaps. And this one is important. It will be restrained without assuming more than the evidence really supports. Novice arguers and people in the bar and cable TV people tend to way overstate their case. They claim that their evidence leads to conclusions that their evidence really doesn't support. Doing that, overstating what the implications are of your evidence, it reduces your credibility. I mean, people say, you're exaggerating, you're making stuff up, and they kind of quit believing you. Strong warrants may consider and respond to counter arguments. Always, whenever you're making an argument, always be thinking about what what would somebody who disagreed with me, what would they say? What would their argument be? And then try to respond to it in your original paper. It's really hard to win an argument if you ignore the other side's argument instead of confronting them and explaining why they fail. The really great philosophers, I think of Thomas Aquinas, for example, in his argument, and he went on at great length. I'm not asking you to do that, but he went on at great length. He identified every single argument he could think of against the claim he was making. And then one by one, he methodically showed why it wasn't true. Well, that's real persuasive. I mean, that's pretty hard to ignore when somebody does that. There may be just obvious arguments against your position that you know that people are going to disagree with you because they think X, Y, Z. It's really a good idea. Well, then respond to X, Y, and Z. So here's an issue. Let's play around with claim data and warrant a little bit. The issue: what car should we buy? Here are three claims. We should buy this Mini Cooper because it is economical. Or we should buy this used Volvo because it is very safe. Or we should buy this Honda Civic because it is red. So let's go into that a little bit more. We should buy this car because it's economical. Think about what assumptions have to be true in order for the claim to make sense. We should buy this car because it's economical. Well, that's true if economy is the main criterion we should use in choosing a car. Or we should buy this car because it's safe. Well, that makes sense if safety is the main criterion we should use in choosing a car. And we should buy this car because it is red. Well, that makes sense if it's true that we should buy a car that is red. Now, what I want you to pay attention to in this is that it's possible that we can agree with the claim, but disagree with the data. For example, we could argue for number one that some other car is cheaper. So we're not disagreeing about the claim that that we should buy. We're not disagreeing with the assumption that we should buy a cheap car, but we're disagreeing with the claim that this car is in fact the cheapest. Also, we could disagree with the underlying assumption that we should buy the cheapest car, when maybe we don't think that economy is the main thing. Maybe handling or speed or style is the most important criterion. I just want you to think a little bit about that difference between supporting or attacking the stated claim and supporting or attacking the underlying assumption. And part of it is just kind of develop the habit of noticing what the underlying assumptions are, or being aware that there are underlying assumptions. When I was a debate coach, I used to try to get the kids, especially the quick kids, to quit responding to all of the silly arguments that the other side was making. Bring their underlying claim to the surface, attack it. Make it clear and then attack that, even though they didn't actually say that. Just make it clear, but in order for what you're saying to be true, this needs to be true, and this is not true. What I found was really often that quite flusters people. They may not have thought about what their underlying assumptions were. And these underlying assumptions are really kind of simple and obvious. It does get harder. But that last claim, we should buy this car because it is red. Do you sense something's wrong with that? I can support it. I can provide you with data, evidence that it's red. I surveyed 100 people asking them what color it was, and those who answered red were 100%. Or we ran a spectroscopic test and science confirms that the color really is red. But you still may be thinking, that's really not the point. I don't see what the color has to do with buying a car. If you're not satisfied, it's probably because you really don't see a way to get from the facts, the car is red, to the claim, you should buy it. The problem is that the claim, to use Talman's phrase, is unwarranted. We need some kind of an argument that connects the claim and the data. The car is red and I should buy it, but there's no warrant there. Why should I buy it? Because it's red. There's no backing for the claim that redness is the main criterion we should use. What I've been calling the unstated assumption behind each of the claims is what Talman calls the warrant. All those unstated assumptions are the warrants in those arguments. So claim, we should buy a used Volvo. Stated reason, it is very safe. Warrant, we should buy the car that is the safest. So there you see the whole argument laid out. Claim, data, it's safe. Warrant, we should buy the car that is safest. It's actually pretty simple. The warrant is what fleshes out the argument, what gives it development and detail. And I was using the terms grounds and backing. If you're flushing out the grounds, we say, are all the facts, data, examples, evidence, chains of reasons we use to support the stated reason. The backing are all the facts, data, evidence, examples, or chains of reasoning we use to support the warrant. So we can either have grounds if we're supporting the claim, or backing if we're supporting the warrant. I'm not going to really get technical or ask you to remember much about backing or grounds. If you remember claim, data, and warrant, I'll be satisfied. But I do want you to think about, when you're making an argument, where do you put your energy? You can put a lot of it into the evidence, or you can put a lot of it into the warrant. And which you choose to do really depends on what argument you're making and who you think your audience are. If the writer and the audience already agree that economy is the main thing you should think about when choosing a car, but they disagree which of these two cars is the cheapest, is it the Civic or is it the Mini Cooper? Well, in that case, you're going to have to spend your time providing grounds in the form of data about fuel economy, maintenance costs, taxes, licensing fees, resale value, all of that. But on the other hand, if both the writer and the audience agree that Volvos are very safe, but they disagree about whether safety is even what we should be thinking about, I mean, what we should base our decision on, then the writer might argue that this car is best for a couple with young children. A personal anecdote might come in. The husband of the couple that is buying the car lost a sister in an auto accident several years ago and is obsessed with safety. He could never enjoy driving or riding in a car that wasn't, in his mind, the safest car he could buy. And the wife of the couple agrees. But someone else might agree that safety is the most important thing, but disagree that Volvos are the safest cars. If that's the disagreement, if that's the one that you anticipate as a writer that someone's going to disagree with, then you turn your attention to providing evidence in the form of insurance claim data, crash test data, details about how the car is actually constructed, that sort of thing. But let's get back to this red car. Now, it might be easier to articulate our dissatisfaction with it with a little bit more vocabulary. We can say now that the argument is weak because the warrant is silly. We can see why safety or economy could be used to choose a car, but redness? What backing can you think of that might make the warrant seem sensible? Well, let me suggest a more developed warrant. We are shopping for a car for Grandma. Grandpa died 4 months ago. Grandma has hardly left the house since then and needs to snap out of her depression. She likes to drive, even though Grandpa usually did all the driving in that clunky old Buick they owned. She never liked that car and she won't drive it now, maybe because it reminds her of Grandpa. What Grandma really needs is a sporty, new, little, easy to drive and park car. So of course, redness isn't the only criteria we should think about, but the other criteria, there are dozens of sporty little cars on the market that fit our other criteria. What is most important, I think, is that the car be red. That's always been her favorite color. Red is youthful and energetic. I think a little red car will help her snap out of her morning and get her out of the house. And let's get it for her by next Monday. That's her birthday. Let's have her wake up and see her own little red car in the driveway. So I say, sure, let's get the Civic. It's available today, and it is just exactly the kind of red that will perk Grandma up. When you're constructing your argument, you need to be asking yourself, will my audience buy my stated reason? Will people agree with this? Will this persuade them? If they won't, then you need to provide substantial grounds that support your evidence. Focus on the evidence. Will my audience accept my warrant? If not, then you'll need to think more about providing backing by making your reasoning, your warrant, more explicit, more clear, or more compelling. So this is just an introduction to thinking about how to make arguments by focusing on the parts of a good argument: the claim, the data, and the warrant. If you consciously think about these things while you're reading, identifying claims and evidence and warrants in the things you read, and if you intentionally create and organize the parts of your writing, thinking about claims, data, and warrants, you will find it gets more and more clear. This is one of those things I think that might seem a little confusing and overlapping at first, but it really gets to be quite simple if you play with it. If you keep at it, it will eventually seem like second nature. One of the truisms I've thought about teaching writing or teaching philosophy is I decided a long time ago that it's impossible to teach writing. Although anybody can learn to do writing, the key is that learning to do it, it isn't really anything I say or show. It's what you think about it. There's only one effective learning strategy in all of the books that have been written about teaching and education. The main thing, there's only one effective learning strategy, and that is you need to think about it. And that's just as true of this as it is of everything else. You might be listening to a politician or a journalist, and the observation will pop into your mind, whoa, that's an unwarranted assertion. I'll put some documents on the website, including your assignment sheet for writing your first CDW position paper, which will be on Socrates' apology. As always, if you're having trouble or you're confused, don't just suffer silently by yourself, or do that for a while, but don't let it go on too long. If you can't figure it out, get a hold of me. You can use email. I've been reminded this week that I have a college email, which is new for me, and I hadn't been checking it, so I'm afraid some of you waited a little long for an answer. But we can do it in email, or if you want, I mean, I'm perfectly open to having office hours and meeting with you individually. Just let me know. If we're all kind of isolated in this new COVID world, but I assure you, you're not alone. If you want help, reach out. We'll see you next time.